We took our COVID money and paid for it.
When I get the irony is I have a feeling the training is to how to identify spam emails.
Yes.
And we just did it at my work, and I totally fell prey to one. And then I'm like, oh wait, they said look at who it's from, and, you know. But I did just get that, yeah.
Future, whatever.
Yep, it's like his driver's license.
Microsoft.
Yes.
Oh, there's something wrong with your Microsoft.
Yeah.
I like to do it.
Oh, so oh my God,
I'm not going to touch it.
how do they know? Or oh my God, I was just about to call you. What should I do?
She was happy.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Well, you can't turn it off. I don't see an on and off switch.
Oh, you can't.
There's just a button that says push.
Yeah, it doesn't do anything.
Oh, that's funny.
No,
Yeah,
it's there
I'll
just for,
She leaves for the I'll bring it.
No,
What's your direct line? So if I got
appreciate it.
great bet.
no, I love like, oh my God, I'm totally having comments. What should I do?
I have to share.
How many people did you think were coming to this? You're going to have a lot of leftovers to take back to work tomorrow.
I had one guy call me.
You guys can take them to City Hall or take them to your work.
Oh, yeah, Lynn can take them and pass them out to who's ever.
They got that's funny. The prosecutor's office is right one floor above me. I better go talk to him.
I call both.
Right?
Free lunch.
Oh, can I get your
leftovers.
listen, call and confirm all this? Click, you know, you're ready. Just let me know.
And then I feel horrible because you know people are falling prey to it.
Oh, you're good.
I don't know how many I expected.
It's
10 administration, give or take,
Sad.
maybe more. If each person eats.
Okay, Tim, you all set? Test, ready, go?
Ready?
Do we have a password for the Wi-Fi here?
I don't have one.
Anybody?
I don't believe there's
Oh,
one
no.
on this building. There should be an unlocked
Yeah.
account.
We'll see if it gets in. You're fine. Go ahead. You can do that. I can just keep messing around.
Okay, I'd like to call to order this Fraser City Council Special Work Session here at the Senior Activity Center for Thursday, January 6th, 2022 at 6:33 p.m. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Item 4, approval of the agenda. I do have just only one amendment. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Councilmember Bransky,
Present.
Councilmember Blanky,
Present.
Mayor Carnegie,
Present.
Councilmember Odell,
present.
Mayor Pro Tem Shornack,
Here.
Councilmember Sutherland,
Present.
and Councilmember Winwicki.
Mr. Winowicki is off tonight.
I make a motion to excuse.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to excuse Councilman Winowicki. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 4, approval of the agenda. I have one amendment. I apologize for the error. 6D would be a public participation. Since it is an open meeting, I do have to have that.
Mr. Mayor, talking to the city manager, do we want to maybe offer that before the closed sessions? That way people can go home?
I don't know. Shelley's driving her home anyway, most likely. So I don't know. She's sticking around.
All
the
the
other one's
audience,
Kelly.
yeah, all the audience.
You never know who's going to rush in.
Right.
Okay.
I agree.
Yeah, I'll drive you home. I don't care.
We'll do that just for you.
Just for you, Shelley. Did you have anything today?
So I'll bring that just above 6.
Okay.
Okay? And that'll be my motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions on that motion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve as amended. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item 5, council workshop. Item A, council manager's role. Mr. Denault.
Who wants to go first? Me, you?
Or Elaine.
Okay, yep. Sure. I think we'll kind of tag team. This isn't really a scripted night, so feel free to jump in and make it more informal. We talked a little bit, Elaine and I, about the different topics on the agenda and just kind of making this a very informal but yet educational opportunity in terms of our new members, of course, who are still learning how things go. And what a great opportunity to get, your second meeting in, really, because a lot of people come in and maybe never get an opportunity to have this kind of meeting. So, right, looking at you. So you don't know what you don't know, and I think it's helpful sometimes for us to talk about those things in terms of historical context, in terms of why things are done the way they're done. But I think also those who've been doing this for several years now might still learn a thing or two tonight. You never know. Because, again, they may have come in under one sort of administration or understanding of how things work, and it may be a misunderstanding. So I just put a few notes together for this topic. For those of you who don't know, City of Fraser was originally established without a city manager. So it wasn't a city manager form of government when it first began. That position was created by the city council in 1966. So if you go back, previous to that, it was just a charter city with kind of like a township runs, really, where you just got a sort of a small town mayor and council and administrators that are hired to do the work of the city and make sure the city's business is carried out. But somebody, and I haven't gone back and looked at who or why, must have thought, this is a lot of work. So even though we're only 4 square miles, we need to put somebody in charge who kind of runs the day-to-day ship. So in 1966, that ordinance was created. Our city charter that was adopted in the 50s authorizes any new administrative office that council might wish to establish, and city management can certainly be one of those. So that's how it was created. That's how it exists to this day. Under the ordinance, which again has the force in a way of charter, it's got the backing of the charter to be an ordinance that creates this position as an administrative position, subject only to supervision of council. No one else supervises the manager. The manager hires, suspends, and fires everyone other than administrative officers, other than the clerk, the treasurer, the assessor, the attorney, the chief of police or fire chief, or in our case, the combined role, or any other administrative positions that the council may create by ordinance. Unless that exists, it's just an employee of the city that the city manager oversees and can hire, suspend, and fire. City manager is obligated to direct and supervise the administration of all departments, offices, and agencies, unless the charter or ordinance provides otherwise, of course. So as a general principle, the buck stops right next to me here in terms of supervision and direction of all of our administration, including departments, offices, agencies. Not so much boards and commissions. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But definitely the day-to-day executive branch stuff. So if you think of your civics from high school, you've got your executive branch, your legislative branch, your judicial branch. City manager would never be able to extend into your purview as the legislative and governing body, which is what you are by charter. You are the legislative and governing body of the city. But anything administrative, anything day-to-day, anything operational, anything executional to carry out the policy or legislation of council, that's the purview of the city manager to do. Obviously, the city manager answers to the city council, so of course, if the city manager isn't carrying things out properly or carefully or right, or there's misunderstandings, you can give different direction to the city manager, of course, as a council, as a whole. But at the end of the day, the city manager is the one that should be and is managing the city, not individual members of the council and not the council as a whole. And that's really all the notes I have on the council manager form of government. Anybody have any input, feedback, comment?
I have a question.
Sure.
In the past, we've had situations with the city manager where a majority, maybe a majority or not, wanted a past city manager written up. And I sat down with that person at that time and talked to the city manager about the situation that happened, but it was not authorized to do a formal write-up. What would be a correct process to do something like that?
All right, so let me understand the question. One city manager wanted a write-up in a file of a prior city manager?
The council, few of the councils wanted the city manager written up for something.
I see, something entered into that personnel file.
So I knew I didn't have the authorization to
Correct.
do that, but I sat down and we went over the situation and make notes of everything.
Correct.
But is there a formal way of doing something like that to make it so at least it's in his work record or something that would?
There is. It's very unusual to do it after the person's no longer with us. But the formal process would be to likely advise that person that the council is going to be taking disciplinary consideration or disciplinary action at a meeting. Mm-hmm. That person may request a closed session because the Open Meetings Act allows for a closed session for disciplinary types of reviews in closed session. If they ask for it, they don't have to. They could say, air it out in public. I'm bulletproof. Go ahead. But most of the times they'd probably ask, and then you would hold a closed session, and you would decide after having that conversation as a group, almost like a tribunal in a way, whether or not as a group you have a consensus to come up with some sort of documentation for the personnel file. You can't make decisions in closed sessions. We'll be talking about Open Meetings Act stuff later. So then once you've concluded that process, you'd come back out into open session, and someone would make a motion, second, and you'd need at least 4 members to openly support adopting whatever it is the consensus was.
So simple majority.
Simple majority, yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
And I don't know, Elaine, I don't know if maybe you'd want to speak at all in terms of what a city manager is. I mean, that's not something they really teach us in school, right?
No. So the city manager is the one with the administrative responsibilities for the city and to make sure we have smooth operations and the doors stay open, we're doing the services that we are required to do. I am a member of the Michigan Municipal Executives, which is really the Michigan arm of the ICMA, which is International City Managers Association. I actually have my conference at the end of the month, and I will be attending that. On a side note, it is in, I think, Troy this year. So I'm pretty much always working, even though I'm away from the office for that. But anyways, so I think when I had my original interview, I was talking about how city management and government kind of works is that you kind of look at it from the perspective of a timekeeping device. I can't remember what the word is.
Oh, the timer that you flip upside down, the egg timer. What do you call those things? Hourglass.
Hourglass, yes. Thank you. So at one end of the hourglass really is the council. So this middle point of communication, so everything kind of flows really through me as the middle point and the city manager, and then obviously the bottom portion of it is the department heads and works its way down. So it really is beneficial, and the way the whole structure of the government is set up is the communication from council flows through the manager, and I work with the department heads to make sure that whatever issues there are or agenda items, things like that, get accomplished. One reason why this is helpful is so that I actually am able to gauge the performance of the department heads and the departments and how they're doing. So if everybody is going in a different direction and talking to different people, I don't know what's going on over here or over here, and that's why the government process is set up that way so that we do have clear communication. Other than that, I guess I don't really have anything else to really explain about that. If anybody has any other questions, let me know. An open door policy, and always email is probably the easiest way to get a hold of me if you have any questions.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
So if a council member needs certain information, financial information, things like that, that you want it requested from you, not from accounting or things of that nature, what in your view is a reasonable amount of time to get that information from a request?
Depends on what the level of the request is.
Well, if it's a basic request, I mean, I'm not like, asking for something super complicated, but if I'm asking for certain financial information so I can make a well-informed decision before, council meetings and things like that, well, what in your view would be a adequate response for a simple matter?
There really isn't any way of telling without knowing what the particular request is. I mean, there are always different circumstances, different things that are taken into consideration if you're looking for some information. I can give you for example, FOIA requests. We are required to respond to a request from the public within 5 days. That's not necessarily gathering the information, because sometimes it may take days, weeks, months to be able to put together information. But we are required to respond within 5 days that we at least got it, we're working on it, we need more time, or here's an estimate, or we have the information ready. I personally think that I should be able to get a hold of, or at least give a response letting you know where I am with something within 24 hours. Obviously, you've got vacations, sick time, all that kind of stuff, but at least to be able to get a, hey, I got your request, I'm working on it, right. I would say within 24 hours.
Okay, thank you.
And I was going to add, too, to support Elaine a little bit, and just a city manager concept in general. In my experience, it's extremely valuable that council people feel comfortable letting the information flow through the conduit, because at the end of the day, it's not just, I mean, from her perspective, yes, she does need to know what's going on, right? She'll ultimately have responsibility if something happens that she wasn't privy to. But I think from the department heads' perspectives and anybody below them, there's a certain level of discomfort. Like they feel like, I have to do something to please you. You're the council. This is important. I have to do whatever you ask of me, and I have to help.
Have you met our employees?
Well, I'm saying in my experience as a general principle, right?
Saying.
But my point in saying that is sometimes we have to put the other shoes on, and we have to realize that we may be a little bit uncomfortable asking somebody for something, but at the same time, they're going to probably have the same sort of discomfort in a different way. They're going to feel obligated and responsible and really want to do the right thing and help, or this is coming from a council person, and they, I don't want to let them down. All the while, their good intentions and your good intentions in the request are leaving her out of the loop, and that's not fair to her. So I think that's to support you, what you were trying to say a little bit. In my experience, it has to be that way, where that's the purpose of a manager. That's the purpose of running the whole show, is so that they kind of do know what's happening in all different directions. Are there going to be times when, because we're a small town and we know everybody, are there going to be times when you say, hey, Mr. Smith or Mrs. Smith, could you help me with this issue I got from a resident, right? You're going to do that. It's human nature. But maybe as part of that conversation, maybe you say, I'm going to let Elaine know too, but I ran into you today, or it was convenient, so I'm asking you to. Or if you don't mind, I know I'm supposed to run it through Elaine, but it just was top of my mind while I was seeing you. Could you maybe just go talk, to let her know? There's ways you can do it, I think, without feeling like I'm not allowed to talk to people, right? I don't think we're trying to convey that message either. I think it's more about just making sure that the efficiency of the city, it's right here, and it's going to be a lot less efficient if we're not following that chain of command, really. If you think about it from a military structure or a hierarchy of power, the chain of command it starts here, and it has to flow to the rank and file troops who have to get the work done. And if it doesn't go here, if the commander, if the general is giving an order to somebody 2 steps below on the hierarchy, that person is like, oh God, the general told me to do it, but their superiors above them don't even know it was asked, and that can be an issue sometimes. Hopefully never, but it can be.
Well, and one other issue above and beyond that is if there is some type of serious emergency issue where time is of the essence and an issue needs to be resolved, you can't get a hold of me, you can't get a hold of Sarah as the assistant city manager, and it's a police issue or a safety issue on the road or park or something, then yes, feel free to reach out to who you need to do for that. I would hope that at some point in time, either you or the department head would make a connection with me just to make sure that I'm aware of the situation so that we can keep track of everything. And when it comes time to assess the performance of the department heads, I know what I'm dealing with.
Just a little bit of history for the new council people. In the past, it's been done where, how do I be coy about this? Council has asked department heads to do something that's actually using taxpayers' dollars to benefit themselves, and that's the wrong way to do things. And it's happened in the past, and one word I can say is just Target, and I think everyone would understand exactly what I'm talking about. So we try to avoid that. We're only 4 square miles, and when something like that happens, it just, it goes all over the place. So.
And I think, Mike, to your point, there have also probably been, and they might be with great intentions, but there have probably been requests to help a business with something that isn't really a city function, And that's a taxpayer expense that maybe it is a great service that we're providing to that business, but legally shouldn't have been bent for that purpose. So exactly. I think that supplements your comment too. Yep.
Mike? I agree with what, Patrice said earlier, and we giggled, but she's right. I think that we just went through a bad batch with the employees. You're absolutely right. We went through almost an internal war going on. But what Don said is true, and I apologize to refer to this, but when I worked in the city hall, we didn't like to see council people, to be frank with you. And it wasn't, when we were respectful and everything. But if you put it in a logical, diagram, so to speak, if we didn't report, like say, for example, if a council person said to me, hey, the nets aren't up at the park, whatever, so then I would either call the DPW as a director or go to the city manager. And that's how it went. No council person ever came in to tell me that they wanted a report or they wanted whatever, because I would respond to them, I'm sorry, you have to go through the city manager, and that's how it is. The other good part of that is it renders order for all of us if 7 of us are on different pages and Elaine's trying to accomplish something with Sarah, we look foolish. We look, foolish. So I totally agree that procedure needs to be reinvented. What it does is it shows our respect for the employees also. We go through their boss. We go through the chain of command, and it just always seemed to work so much better. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
And I love your net analogy, because let's take that to the next level. So councilperson A says to the rec director or the city manager or somebody, it's March 31st and the weather's nice. Let's get the nets up for tennis. And then councilperson B comes in and goes, what are the nets doing up? It's only April 1st. Are you crazy? Take those nets down. And it creates that horrible fear and pit in the stomach of the employee who's like, I don't know what to do now. I've got one saying I should, one I shouldn't. It's just, following the hourglass. I like that analogy. That's good.
I agree.
Okay, then I'm going to respectfully disagree with you, because I don't think any of our, I cannot remember once walking to City Hall or anywhere else where an employee sees us and goes, like, oh my God. Like, oh, because most of us have known for like decades before they're not going to take it. Yeah, they could care less. Plus, I've never walked in and like said, "Oh, do you know who I am?" I don't think anybody.
Employee wrong.
Huh?
No one wants the boss in when they're working.
But I don't really consider us the boss, so. I mean, technically, I know, yeah, but I don't, and so.
Patrice, I think the message we're trying to convey is, as a council person, take your name out of it, take who you are as a person out of it. That status, that title, it sort of carries with it a certain, I don't want to call it a fear, but it carries with it a sort of level of eminence. Like, these are the council people. These are the people who make the decisions. And I know, you're right. When we know everybody and we're all comfortable with everybody, maybe that's gone. But the next person at the city council table who nobody's ever met before, now, oh my gosh, that's a council person. I don't know what they're like. I don't know who they are. I don't know if I can trust them. There is that level of eminence that comes with the title, I think.
I was going to say, heck, I don't even think I would even hazard to say that half of our residents don't, I just don't think it holds this.
Well, you do have to be careful with the title. Even me working with the public safety, I have to totally separate. I have to make the staff, and just because I sit on this board doesn't allow me to do things I want. I still, to this day, follow the chain of command on the public safety side. I'm just an employee there, so it's important to follow that chain of command.
All right, we ready for the next topic?
Yep.
Yes.
All right. Hopefully all of you have one of these. If you don't, I brought it to you to show you what it looks like, so you can get one. This is your rules and procedures. Yay, everybody's got one. There will be a quiz later, so see how you do. The basics on council rules and procedures and decorum. So we updated this on September 9th of 2021, but as you can see, it's been around for a long time. It says adopted March 8th, 2001. I'm assuming that was probably the first version of it because it says adopted. And I would have been around for that, but I didn't go back to check and see if I'd worked on one before that time. So whatever the case, it's been around for at least 20 years now, going on 21. Some of the procedures you'll note in that book are required by charter. I'm a stickler for, as we've done updates, making sure that anything that's in that book, it's required by charter so that you don't feel like we have this weird rule. And the perfect example is calling the roll alphabetically, right? We have this weird rule that says we call the roll alphabetically. I want to change that rule. Well, I'm a stickler for making sure that we say right in here, that's a charter thing. So you got to ask the people to change that, not you guys, which is unfortunate.
Let's ask the people.
If your last name starts with a B, right? But it's also unfortunate if your last name starts with a W and it's a 3-3 tie every time,
Yep.
right?
I tried changing it, remember?
What's that?
I tried changing it.
You did try changing it, yes. It's not fair. And Robert's rules suggest that the maker of the motion should be first, the seconder should be next, and then there should be an alternating roll call. I think Cindi probably attests to that from the city clerk point of view. So unfortunately, the voters or whoever wrote the charter back in the 50s thought this would be a brilliant idea. Alphabetical is the way we're going to do it. So that's how they did it back then.
Yeah, it is. It is not fair to the last person.
It's not.
Or the first.
Or the first.
Right.
In fact,
show my card
the
everyone
maker.
else.
Right. In fact, the maker of the motion made the motion. They should be the first one to vote, right?
Exactly.
So anyway, that's how it's done. If the charter isn't mentioned in here, then I think I'm pretty safe in saying that these are your rules and your order of business, the things you've decided as a council over the years that you'd like the rules to be. A lot of the time, the question inevitably is, what force do these rules have? Do they mean anything. Not really. I mean, as a council, you're supposed to work together. As a council, you're going to have differences of opinion. As a council, there are going to be times when you might want to suspend the rules. And if the majority says, you know what, I moved to suspend the rules for tonight on this particular point. Let's just do it a different way. That's okay. Paul O'Reilly, my mentor, used to say, the rules are only as good as 4 people think they are, right? So if 4 of you say, let's suspend this rule for the night, put it back in place for tomorrow, but for tonight, it just doesn't fit what we need to do. That's okay too. Obviously, proposals for changing rules, coming up with new ideas, everything in here is probably in there because of something that happened or something that occurred that someone felt the need to work on, fix. It's a lot like warning labels on products, right? Some lawyer sued somebody and somebody got millions of dollars and the company's like, well, geez, we just put a warning label on there. Maybe that won't happen again, right? So pretty much everything in here comes from somewhere, and there is some history to it, which unfortunately we don't keep a running commentary to explain. But if enough people remember back far enough, we could probably get you an answer as to where it comes from or why. Some of them will be self-evident too, just in the way they're written. A little bit of charter trivia, just because we're talking about the charter requiring certain things, and one of those things is that you have rules of procedure. The clerk and the presiding officer, which is usually the mayor, but they call it the presiding officer in the charter, must sign the journal of the proceedings. I don't know if Cindi knows that. The journal of the proceedings, which we now call the minutes, right? We just call it that. But back then, they wanted the clerk and the mayor to both sign the minutes or the journal.
Yeah, we sign every one.
Yep. A vote on all of the ordinances and resolutions requires a yes or no vote unless it's unanimous. So anytime you do an ordinance or resolution, we're supposed to ask everybody yes or no on the question, which I didn't even know that until preparing for tonight. That's a little nuance in the charter, unless it's a unanimous. So basically what I think is the mayor, what you can do is say all in favor, aye, any opposed. And if you don't hear any opposed, you're done. Right. If you hear an opposed, then I think you're supposed to go back through and identify for the record, yays and nays, or yeses and nos as it says in the charter. Votes are not allowed, so you are not allowed to vote if you have a conflict of interest on something as a council person. Obviously, that's a case-by-case analysis that we probably can't spend 3 hours on tonight, but conflicts of interest can arise in different ways. But the flip side of that is you cannot refuse to vote on something unless a conflict exists, or everyone else on the council excuses you from voting for some reason. So it's an obligation that you have. It's a fiduciary duty to the city to vote, no matter how uncomfortable it is, no matter how badly you feel about having to vote a certain way, unless you've got an excused absence that night, which some people, I suppose, could do if they're really scared of voting on something. But it is your duty, it's your obligation, it's part of your oath to vote. I've always explained it over the years as and I think I just said it, it's a fiduciary duty that you owe as part of your position to vote on things, to take a stand in position on something, no matter how uncomfortable, awkward, opposed you are or in favor you are of it, unless you have a true conflict of interest of some kind that would make it beneficial to you.
So can you kind of touch on misfeasance, malfeasance, nonfeasance? Because I think nonfeasance would be not voting.
Yes, yes. Misfeasance, malfeasance, and nonfeasance are reasons why the governor could remove you from your position. It's state law. Nonfeasance would be failing to do something, failing to do feasance, whatever that word meant back in the day. And obviously misfeasance would be doing something wrong, and malfeasance would be doing something with ill intent. But all 3 of those things can be reasons why you failed in your oath and keeping up your obligation as a council person, as an elected official. So, yes, so you must vote unless you're excused by a unanimous vote of everybody else to let you off the hook, or you have a conflict of interest and either legal or the whole council agrees you do have a conflict and we have to let you out of this.
Don, the conflict can be defined individually, right?
It is, yeah. It's going to be case by case.
Okay.
It really is. I mean, I always start with, are you benefiting financially? Because that's the big one, right? You should never be voting on a contract that your spouse or your child or somebody or in some way you're going to benefit money-wise, pecuniary gain they call it. But let's just say money, right, or contract or work. Beyond that, conflicts start to get a little bit more iffy. But a lot of times in the school context, to take it out of the city realm for a minute, it gets a little awkward when a school board member has a spouse who's a teacher in the union, right? Because now the teacher in the union, if the school board has to approve the union contract, and the union contract is calling for raises, that school board member is going to be the beneficiary of the raise that his or her wife gets, or her husband gets. So that could be a time when it's appropriate to excuse yourself because you have a pecuniary gain, you have a potential conflict of interest on the vote.
I had a quick question. Since there's a few members on the board here that are on the council, they have worked for the city or retired or things like that, when pension matters or anything like that comes, are those members supposed to excuse themselves, or can they vote on that matter since it affects them? And
I don't think paying the debt, if that's what you're referring to, paying the bills of the past, I don't think, or obligations of the future counts. If you're asking, and I've never seen this, someone else may know more about it than I do. If you're asking if a member here would ever have to vote on a change to the pension that the council has to decide, which I don't think they would, because there'd be a pension board or something that would probably decide that. But in the event that, yes, in the event that you were asked to vote on something that either benefits or harms you financially, you have a conflict, right? A little bit more charter trivia. The last one I had on the charter trivia was names have to be called alphabetical, but I hit that one early. So, Robert's Rules of Order generally apply to meetings. If a lot of times when I was on the Macomb County Bar Association's Board of Directors and worked my way up to the presidency of that, there were people on there that had never, because they're lawyers that do different things, they'd never heard of Robert's Rules of Order. So I always recommend having a cheat sheet. This one's kind of cool. It's 4 pages. Well, it's very small writing. You're going to need your magnifying glass
compared to the book.
to read it. Oh, right. So it really does distill a lot of the motions and the rules, whether there's debate allowed, whether they require a second, what takes priority. It's helpful stuff. I don't know if during the pandemic it's an option, but I've seen presentations put on by, I think, the MML and I think the MSU extension for councils and boards. They do a fantastic job of really speaking parliamentary procedure in plain English and really giving you the basics. So if anybody's interested in that, we can find that information. But just having a cheat sheet or something to understand it. You don't have to understand this stuff because you have me and you have Elaine and you have Cindi and we can help guide the ship. But I will tell you, there are some times where you get some nuanced procedural questions that we kind of have to wing it to know the answer if you don't have your cheat sheet handy. So the basics are, if you made the motion, if you have the floor, you can make the motion, and the seconder, they need a second for the motion to be discussed, right? I mean, we're not super formal in Fraser, so there are times we discuss things before a motion because it's a topic. We're discussing the topic. We may never get to a motion. Maybe it's just a discussion item. Or maybe a motion is made, but then nobody seconds it. Well, that motion then is considered dead. It dies for lack of support. No reason to continue debating it or beating it to death. You have a motion and a second. We had this come up in another community the other day. A person made a motion to do something. Discussion ensued after the seconding, and that person ended up voting against the thing that they moved the motion to do, right? Because they were convinced. They were convinced that, I made this motion thinking it was the right move, but I've heard from everybody now. And now I don't agree that it's the right thing to do. So, in some cases, we'd probably just withdraw it at that point, but she ended up voting against her own motion because it was the right thing to do, and she was convinced to change her mind. And it wasn't anything major. It was innocuous in the big picture of things, but it was a fascinating question I've never seen before of putting the cart before the horse. It was the question of, do we budget for something first, or do we create the something and then budget for it? And it's the kind of thing that I can see all of us talking about it from time to time as well. They ultimately concluded that they should create the something first, work with administration, figure out what it looks like, how it's defined, what it is, and then budget for it later. So that's where they ended up going. But good parliamentary stuff. We do have some specific parliamentary rules I'll just hit. The mayor is the chair of the meeting. He's known as the presiding officer. All member requests, even to speak, must be recognized by the chair. So you are out of order. You don't have the floor, basically, if you aren't recognized to speak by the chair, by the mayor. Failure to honor those decorum requirements can be ruled out of order. And I think we're pretty informal, and we don't rule people out of order much. But, if we had to, just to put order back into a meeting, that's what we would do. Direct communication between members is generally not permitted unless the dialogue is granted by the chair. So, it should never become a debate between 2 or 3 or 4 people. It should always be directed through the chair to so-and-so. So, if Dana had a question for Patrick, she would say through the chair to Mr. Odell, right? And then that way he says, go ahead, and then she could direct her question to him, and it's his privilege whether or not he wants to answer her question. References to other members are supposed to be council member so-and-so, and it's supposed to be last name. Again, we're not super formal all the time. Nobody's going to get in trouble if we call somebody more colloquially by their name because we know each other, but the rules do say council member Baranski, not council member Amy, right? Is when you're addressing others. Same for the mayor. When you're addressing the mayor or referring to the mayor, you're supposed to say, and this is again in our rules, Mr. Mayor or Madam Mayor, or you can use Mr. Chairman or Madam Chairwoman. Either one is fine.
Is this our rule? I'm sorry, is this our rules or, okay.
Yep. The proper process for gaining the floor, you notify the mayor of your desire to speak. And we in Fraser have the luxury of those little buttons. So you hit the little button so he can see it light up, and then he knows you're asking for permission. So we're not all talking over each other, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mayor, and he's trying to figure out who's next because he can watch the buttons light up, hopefully, and decide who goes first. But if, for some reason, if you don't use the button, or if it's just more informal that night, you can just say, Mr. Mayor. And if no one else is asking for the floor and he's comfortable, you can say, yes, council member so-and-so, you have the floor. And then you can speak on whatever it is you'd like to speak on. If the member has a question or a directive for someone, I think I already kind of hit on this, you should start it with through the chair to, whoever it is, right? Through the chair to the city attorney, through the chair to the city manager, through the chair to the resident who just asked a question. And then Mr. Mayor will say, absolutely, you have the floor to direct that to the person you've asked to direct that to. It's just a formality. It's just meant to take out of parliamentary procedure any combativeness, any adversarialness, any direct confrontational types of things that aren't under control. It gives the mayor the ability to make sure everybody's taking a breath, make sure he understands what's happening next, and then controlling that dialogue. There might be a time or two when the mayor says, you know what, I appreciate that you'd like the floor to direct that to somebody, but I don't think it's appropriate at this time. If that ever becomes a war where you really feel it is appropriate and the mayor is overruling you for some reason, you have to ask council to overrule the mayor. Council can do that. It's parliamentary. So if 4 of you say, you know what, I would like to hear the resident's answer to this question that council member so-and-so wants to ask. If 4 of you agree, great. And the mayor's going to have to let that resident answer, or direct the question. The resident doesn't have to answer it, of course, not under orders to. But sometimes that could come up when you just really want the answer to a question. I see it more, not at council level or school boards. I see it more in like zoning board and planning commission stuff, because you either have a question for a resident who's opposing something, or you're wondering about facts that have been presented by the petitioner or the applicant for something. So that's a lot more common in those settings, but it can happen here too, so.
Well, Dennis, can I interrupt you?
Sure.
On this one? It's been a normal policy since I've been up here, is when the citizen participation, I've seen they can get very frustrated, angry, language, I've seen it all. And obviously they go through the chair, but council usually never addresses them back. And that's what we try to do, because it creates that hostility and then back and forth and all that. What's your opinion on that? Is that a rule, or is that just something that we've been trying to do to, because you can get, we've seen it where if someone picks out a council person just going off on them, and
Sure.
I shut them down, but I don't want the council person to get themselves in trouble by going back at them, so if you can.
So let's walk through that. Let's say we have a resident that comes up and wants to just rail on one of you for something that they're very unhappy about. They are allowed, with a certain level of decorum, to complain about your performance, to say you shouldn't have voted this way, or why aren't you advocating this way? And they can get mean. Now, they're not supposed to make it personal, so the mayor can rule them out of order, if out of line, if they're starting to call names, or they're starting to be derogatory or use language they shouldn't be using at a public meeting. But that being said, they have the right to address you under the Open Meetings Act under reasonable rules of decorum. If the council person feels the need to respond, I advise against it in most cases. But if that need is strong, for whatever the reason might be, they would ask the mayor, again, through the mayor to the resident, and then if the mayor feels okay with that, can say, yes, council member so-and-so, you may address the resident or answer the resident's questions. Another way to do it is the mayor could say, we've heard all of your questions, we've heard all of your concerns, we're taking notes, and we're going to have that go through administration to follow up, right? That usually, in my experience, diffuses a lot of it, because sometimes people just don't know, and this goes back to the whole eminence thing, Patrice, that sometimes people just don't know where the right place to go with their complaint is. A lot of people just think this is the place. This is in public, there's the lights, there's the TV, you guys are elected, you answer to me. They don't realize that really all you're going to do is send them over here anyway. So, and it's a nice deflection tool as long as it's done respectfully, I think, and people know they're being heard. So for most of that, that would be my answer. My general advice and guidance has always been to, and it might not hurt to have a script almost for public participation before it begins. Instead of just saying you're limited to 3 minutes, maybe to say, we're going to listen to the public's, comments this evening and take notes. And if there's anything we can follow up on you with, we will. And if we have any direct answers immediately for you tonight, we can try to get those to you as well. But just understand, as a member of the public, we won't be engaging in a dialogue. That's not what this is. We're here to hear you and then try to follow up with you later. We're not here to dialogue with you tonight. And I think that's the best approach, and it works, in my opinion, very, very well in all the boards and commissions and councils that I work with.
Send you a draft and you can check.
Send you a draft? Yeah.
We developed something in Marine City and it worked out very well.
I think it's the right.
Pretty much that, this is your opportunity to voice your concerns, share any comments, feedback. We won't be responding this evening, but it will be passed on to the appropriate party to be addressed at a later time.
And
that's great, because, this last council's been fabulous. We've never had something out of control, but when I was pro tem, it was just out of control. It was just, oh my God.
Oh, yeah, it was a feeding frenzy.
And Elaine won't love this answer, but people like to hear, especially from the chair of the meeting, especially from the mayor, that power, that eminence that they think that flows through the name. They like to hear you say, or whoever's sitting in your seat say, we've heard everything you've had to say tonight. Ms. Levin, is that something you or your staff could follow up on with this resident? They love to hear that, because if they feel like they got your attention and now you're the boss, you're telling, this is how it's going to be, right? That it just makes people feel at ease, like they went home and they were heard. Doesn't mean they're going to get their way. It just means they were heard.
Oh, no, I answer every phone call, so I can tell that it makes a difference.
It makes a huge difference. Sometimes people just need to be heard, and sometimes we don't want to hear it, but that's okay, right? That's what we're here for, is to listen to it and make them feel heard. What else did I have here? Council's rules. So if you go through here, you'll see the various types of motions and their precedents and whether or not they're debatable. To make a motion, technically you're supposed to say, I move that. Now, nobody gets that formal. I make a motion to is fine. But the words technically are, I move that. That what? That we do this, or that we adopt that, or that we approve this. Any member may request a roll call vote at any time. So if for some reason you just feel like this is an important issue and I want to hear everybody say yes or no to it, you can request it, and no one can stop you from doing that, and then we're going to do a roll call, because it's your prerogative as a member to ask for that.
Is that similar to call the question?
No.
No, totally different.
No, totally different. Roll call is you've all voted unanimously, or maybe you haven't gotten the vote yet.
Okay.
And the council member says, Mr. Mayor, I'd like a roll call vote, please.
To see exactly. So
Yeah,
that it's
to see who voted which way.
Got it.
A lot of times I don't love it, because a lot of times you're doing it to kind of pin people down. But you know what? That's okay too, because at the end of the day, if it is a divided council on something, the mayor might call for it anyway, just to make sure he knows that the vote is 4-3 or 3-4, right? Just to be clear on what the numbers are. So yeah, you can move for a roll call vote.
Okay.
Not move, you can just request one, and you'll get it.
Can you touch on call the question too, please?
Yeah, so call the question, it's really not proper terminology, but for
What
purposes.
is the break terminology?
Oh,
I didn't have this training.
I know.
That's all I've ever heard in
Guess
12
what?
years,
We didn't
so.
either.
Everybody
right.
calls it call the question. It's something like consider the previous question or some horrible
Rip it out as
formality.
4-page Robert's
Hey,
rules.
I'm gonna use it. I'm
Yeah,
writing.
putting this thing to work,
I
right?
move that. I'm now doing that.
I move that,
You might
right?
as well
Yeah.
make copies of
Move
that
that we
now.
make copies of that
Oh.
cheat sheet.
Yeah, right. I'm gonna have it right here for us. I move that through the chair to.
I don't know if it's something I'm going to find that fast, because they don't use the phrase call the question, so I've got to scan through this to find.
Well,
I'll
tell
get
us
it for you at the break. But for right now, let's call it call the question. So the concept of call the question, as it's become to be known, is you're just tired of debating something to death, and it's time to move on. So any one of you has a certain level of patience with nonsense, and at some point you hit your level. Somebody's going to hit it before someone else is going to hit it, or you're going to wait and see who hits it first.
Oh, you know it's going to be.
But at some point, your level, wherever it's at, you hit it. Call the question is allowed when everyone has had at least one opportunity to voice their opinion. One opportunity.
Right.
So do not
And by
do not
everyone,
do not fear that you could be shut down by call the question,
Council.
because
just council members.
just council members.
Got it.
Yes, every council member has had an opportunity to be heard. You have an opportunity to speak. You ask the mayor for the floor. The mayor's going to give it to you at some point in the process, first, last, or in the middle, wherever you fall. If you're the last one, you haven't spoken yet, and somebody says call the question, you have the prerogative or privilege to say, you know, Mr. Mayor, I really haven't had a chance to speak yet. I'd like to speak now that I've heard everybody else's thoughts. As long as you haven't spoken before, you get that opportunity before call the question can happen. But once you've all had the opportunity to speak, and the mayor's satisfied that it's been a fair opportunity, that it wasn't just a 2-second blip, call the question. I move to call the question. That is designed to get the question before you, the motion and the second that's already been made, voted on. That's the purpose of it. So when you say I'm calling the question, it means I'm calling it to a vote. I'm done with the debate. I'm calling it to a vote, and I think we all should be done with the debate. At that point, then, the question has been called, and the mayor calls for a vote.
Have they updated those rules to say, okay, we beat this to death? Can we please move on?
Right. That's a different question, because if we're moving on, that means we're not even going to vote, right? We're just tired of it, and we're moving on.
No, because moving on could be moving on to.
If there's a motion and a second on the
Yeah.
floor, yeah.
But
Yeah, no, the rules
all
are
the
still.
councils I've been on, I want to be the person calling the question because I'm like, we beat this to death already. We've now not only beat it to death.
Last meeting it happened, and Amy called the question, and Kathy did not have the chance to talk, and she was the last one, so that's why I called on her to talk.
So now I know.
Yeah, no,
And-
I'm saying
And track, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
there's
I know,
gotta-
100%, yeah,
They need
because
to
we,
rewrite some of those just to say, okay, enough.
no,
enough.
they're
Can we move on?
professional and civil rules. They're not Patrice rules. They're not quick and to
That's
the
civil.
point.
It's civil.
I beat this to death.
I said, we've beat this to death. Let's
Oh
move
my
on.
God.
Well, you have to call Robert, Patrice, because
Is he alive still? Because he and I need to have a conversation.
whoever Robert is, he wrote these books.
Yeah, but is he alive still?
We
I don't
only
think so.
follow Roberts because they've adopted Roberts. Right, so they could suspend Roberts, and then she could vote that we beat him to death.
I'm not voting on that. I'm not. You're
Suspend
on your
away.
own, sister. You're on your own.
Oh, you found the call to question? By the way, have I introduced all of you
No.
to Alyssa
No.
Albright? So I was going to do that. Alyssa Albright is a fantastic associate as part of my team at the office. I thought because this is a learning opportunity tonight, I think anybody who hasn't been through this yet can maybe learn a thing or two. And so I thought it'd be great for her to observe and meet all of you. And
Yes.
maybe one day I can finally take a vacation and she can sit in for me once you get comfortable knowing Alyssa. So
I think it might be, I moved the previous question.
that's it. Yep, that's what it was. I knew it had something to do with question. I moved the previous question.
Love it.
Yes, which is the strangest
it
way.
along.
And Patrice is right. It's archaic language, but it's conceptually, I move
Like it.
to do something about the previous the question that's before us. This previous
Move it
question
along.
that's been asked. Right. So,
Boy, that could be
thank you.
confusing.
Well, legalese is always confusing. They did that on purpose.
On purpose, yes. Lawyers need jobs, right?
I had a lawyer today tell me that we were reading something and they're like, what the heck does that even mean? I'm like, see, you can't even understand your own language. That's
Your
my
own
point
language.
exactly.
Your own people wrote
Your own people wrote this.
right?
Your own kind.
The last piece of rule trivia, and there's probably so much more we could go through, but certainly take any questions if you have any now or any time. A member may not miss a meeting, this is interesting, without advising the mayor, manager, or clerk and the reasons for the absence. And that's how you get an excused absence. If you haven't told anybody you're not going to be here, one of those three people, then you're not excused.
Well, I don't need a reason.
Why?
now.
Is that an art?
Well, the reason can be vague.
Yeah, I don't accept a reason.
The reason can be personal, right? It doesn't have to be that I have a medical surgery on my elbow. It doesn't have to be that specific. But I think a reason would be, I'm not going to be available this evening for personal reasons, I think is fair, right? Or medical.
Migraine coming on.
Yeah, exactly, right?
I've never missed a
8:33
meeting, by
hearings.
the way, I'm just saying.
Right, so, just so you know, it's a technicality that we've never really enforced or worried about,
Well,
but,
they normally do though anyway, Dan.
what's that?
They normally do let me know.
Oh, I think so. I think courtesy, everybody's going to give that courtesy, right? But think about, councils of the past or councils of the future where you get that renegade, right, who just decides to do their own thing. They're not going to let anybody know they're not coming.
We've had
If,
'em.
if somebody doesn't get an excused absence, what's the procedure after that? Is it warning? Is it
in
after
there.
so long the council
Yeah,
can vote the other one
there
out?
is.
Isn't it 25%?
Yeah, 3 meetings.
Yeah, 25% of your meetings.
You could be removed.
Can be.
Can be.
Not mandatory.
Right. They could explain it away.
See, and that's archaic too, because if someone gets in a car accident
It's
and nobody
unexcused.
knows it yet.
3 unexcused.
No, I know of the 3 unexcused. I'm just saying, it's saying you have to, I know out of courtesy's sake, that would be
You
that.
can excuse it after the fact.
Yes.
too, though.
Yeah.
The rule- you picked up on what I was about to say.
Sorry.
The rule
You
doesn't
have
say
to.
when.
Right.
The rule doesn't say when you have to tell the mayor, manager, or
that
clerk.
you just
It
have
says
to.
that you
Okay.
must let them know. And-
I thought it was like prior to the meeting. I'm like,
Doesn't
yeah,
say
that's not realistic, but okay.
Right, you're right. Emergencies happen, right?
Yeah, we did have a councilman who almost took a year off. and finally
Yeah.
council voted to not excuse.
Yeah,
and
who-
move on. Remember the votes?
What was his name? I
I
Morelli.
don't want to say his
I was
Really?
gonna say, then he died.
He was a good man.
Really?
He was a good man.
Yeah, because the voting was getting very difficult.
Yeah, no,
because,
right, you can't,
know,
I mean.
You just can't,
There was never a
want-
tiebreaker.
yeah, a lot of tiebreakers.
I remember that. Yep.
Yeah, he was a good guy.
And that's all I have on rules and procedures and parliamentary procedure and council decorum for all of you, unless you have anything for me or us. Yes, Ken.
We talked about, the question, call the question, and we've been at meetings where other council people would say, point of order. What's the difference between those two things?
So a point of order, if we use that phrase, is because one of us as a council feels that someone is out of order. Whether they're out of order for going too far down a personal rabbit hole or calling people names, or they feel it's out of order because it has nothing to do with what we're here tonight to discuss or talk about, it's just off topic. It's meant to bring the conversation back to where it's supposed to be instead of where it's been going. Once that is asked for, it is the chair's prerogative to determine whether that point of order has validity and should be called, or whether or not, I appreciate that you think he's out of order, but maybe I want to figure out where he's going with this. So I'm going to give him a little more slack or a little more latitude. But the general purpose of point of order is someone feels like something's being done wrong and you want to fix it.
Thank you.
And don't ever be afraid of that. I mean, I don't want you all to think that you ask the mayor for a point of order and maybe he or I say, no, it's not, maybe this isn't quite the time for that yet. We're not there yet. That's not, there's no shame in that, right? If at some point you just feel like it's gone off the rails, ask, right? The worst the mayor could say is, I don't think we're quite off the rails yet. We're almost off the rails, but we'll rein it in,
I can't get off the rail, yeah.
right? All right. I don't think the next topic is mine, so I can.
No, the next
I can-
topic's not yours.
I can take a drink of water.
So, budgetary process. We have a process set forth in our charter for the budget that, first and foremost, it is the city manager's responsibility to prepare and present a budget to city council. In the charter, it's actually chapter 8 of the charter, the finance section, is the responsibility of the budget officer, which I don't necessarily know who that is, but I would presume that it's the city manager because in a different section of the charter, it says that the city manager is the one responsible for the budget. So with that being said, the city manager is required to get their recommended budgets from the departments by March 15th. I have a department head meeting scheduled, I think on the 18th of this month. I will be handing out worksheets. I will be talking to all the department heads, all of the department heads which are new, including myself. So everyone that is in this process will be it will be their first round of going through it in Fraser. So I just want everyone to just kind of think about that for a moment, the fact that none of us have been involved with the current budget that we are in. So I will be working with the department heads and getting that, and they will be having to provide that to me by March 15th. I am required to submit it to City Council on or before the April meeting. So we could either schedule a special meeting to start doing some budget workshops, which I think that would be very helpful and beneficial. Timing-wise, I'm not sure when we're gonna start working on that. One of the other components of the budget is capital improvement plan, and I know that there really has not been a well-developed capital improvement plan in the city, and that's certainly something that it will take some time to be able to prepare. For example, when I worked in Marine City, the only capital improvement plan that they had was the purchase of vehicles, police and DPW. That was it for their capital improvement plan when I started. By the 5 years, when I left Marine City, we had a full comprehensive capital improvement plan that included all of our infrastructure, water, sewer, roads, buildings, capital improvement plans for parks equipment. We had everything in our capital improvement plan. That is the basis for what you look to for when you are budgeting for any type of capital projects. Now, the bulk of the budget is things that are are recurring costs. You have all of your payroll and benefits, all of your utilities, all of your costs that you have for running the operation of the city. So the bulk of the budget really is going to be something where each department head will be able to take a look at what they've done in the past and be able to work from that. The thing that you guys typically would be getting involved with is the discretionary spending, which is, what kind of projects are we potentially going to do this year? What levels of staffing are we going to be increasing, decreasing? Are we going to be looking at any type of promotions? That's what I will be looking to you for some guidance on, about what do we want to accomplish in the next fiscal year as far as projects. One key component of that, kind of looking at one of the next parts on the agenda is economic development. So obviously this last year or two, it's been a little bit crazy. There have been a multitude of grants out there for COVID-related purposes. Right here, we've actually got an example of one of the grants for the video and audio system here for the remote. We are definitely going to be wanting to look to fund purchases and improvements and things with grants as much as possible. But please know that that takes a lot of administrative time to administer grants. It's not something where we put an application in and it's magically done. In particular, federal grants, which many state grants are pass-throughs of federal, so they still have all of the federal rules that you have to uphold. There is a lot of time and management that goes into the grants. You have to have standards for what you're paying people, any of the contractors or anything. You obviously have to go out for bids. There's a lot of paperwork related to it, so I don't want to scare you off of grants. I just want you to know that it's not the be-all, end-all. We are in a position, I think, with our fund balance that we're pretty comfortable. I know that the last year we've done a lot of parks improvement projects. That's been great, but I know that Sarah does have some issues looking at the budget, trying to figure out where we are financially, because until you really get through a year of the finances and get a good understanding of everything, where we are, it's difficult to say, yes, let's buy this, spend that. So I would think with this next budget, we're probably going to be a little bit minimalist and probably focusing just on kind of the essentials and the basics, so keeping our operations running. We can always do budget amendments at any time. We are still working on our audit from last fiscal year. Without having good, true numbers from the audit and taking a look at that, we don't really have a good picture administratively where we are financially. We have a very good idea. Like I said, we have a pretty healthy fund balance. We do have a pretty hefty outstanding obligation for our pensions and post-employment benefits, so like healthcare, things like that. That's very significant. I think our pension is only about 60% funded, which puts us at a level where we're required to make additional payments per a plan that we have with the state. And then our healthcare plan is zero funded. So all the people that we currently have retired, we're paying the healthcare as we go. And we still have people that are in the system now and people that are still coming into the system that we will continue to have that burden in the future. So that's something to take into consideration as well. Moving on with the budget process, as I mentioned, I need to have something to you no later than the April meeting. And we'll be working on putting together some type of scheduling and likely some workshops to meet with council and work on that. There's required to have a public hearing prior to the adoption of the budget. The public hearing has to be notified 10 days prior to the meeting. And then sometime in the window of April 15th to the third Monday in May, we have to have a resolution to adopt the budget. So it's coming fast, and As I said, it's going to be Sarah and mine and all of our department heads' first time working on it. I think it's going to look very different than what it has in the past. I am going to be streamlining it. It's all going to be in BS&A. We're not going to be spending time jumping back and forth between Excel spreadsheets and BS&A and back and forth and back and forth. Sarah and I are both, I think, very strong users with BS&A. We'll be using the notes fields in BS&A. So that way you'll be able to have the detailed information about what the items are that are going to be in some of those line items right there within the budget. So you'll have that detail. Other than that, that's pretty much where we are with the budget. If you have any questions, I can answer, or obviously Sarah's here. She might have a little bit that she wants to share. I'm not sure if you have anything else you want to share. Covered it good? Okay.
I have one. Like, we talked in our last meeting about the budget going forward. All the years I've done it, I've preferred when the department heads present their budget to the council based on their departments. And we've had it done the other way, and it seems like when we hear from the department heads, we get more of the right information. They really know their department, and it gives us a chance to really see them.
Oh, they will be a part of the workshop. Okay. So the way that it's structured and how it really functions is that I need to have a number before I come to you. It is my job, is my role per the charter to provide to you a budget. So I need to be able to get information from all the department heads, put the numbers in so that I at least know, are we in reality here or not? Because otherwise, if we did it the other way, if we just did, say, departments coming to you and everybody saying this is what I want, this is what I'm looking at, we don't know if that is in line with our expected revenues. It takes a lot of time to go through all of the different sources for revenues, all of the different sources for all of the other expenses, going through all the union contracts and figuring out what kind of numbers we have for the budget. So it's a very complicated, time-consuming process to get to that bottom number. But once I have all that information easily imported into BS&A, I have a bottom number. I will be able to work on the fly, and we'll be able to see real-time changes with that bottom number. So we'll be going through department by department. The department heads will be a part of it. We'll be talking about what's included in this budget. We'll be able to easily, on the fly, well, okay, we're not going to do this road project, take a couple $100,000 out. Or I want to see another parks improvement here. We're going to estimate it at about $100,000, put that in there. So it's going to be a very different process, I'm sure, than any of you have seen in the past. We are really going to be utilizing BS&A to, I think, its fullest value.
Okay.
And all the department heads will be here and involved with you.
Since we have new department heads pretty much all across the city for the most part.
100%.
100%, yeah, exactly. When you present the budget to us, are we going to have comparisons from last year to this year? So let's say one department's $2 million this year, they're wanting 2.7. I mean, I want to know, is that a staffing change? Is that equipment that they need to buy? I'd like to see that comparison to compare apples to apples, you know, with what's normally gone on. And
Yep, you'll have all that. So when we work on the budget, typically what you have is, like the last two previous years, the line items will be right there, so you'll be able to line it up. The problem is potentially the department heads, because they weren't involved in the previous budget, they may not even have answers as to why the number is different. We'll certainly do the best that we can. I have some notes from when the previous people worked on the budget, so we'll be able to kind of look at it from that perspective. But you'll see that I would say probably 90–95% of the budget is really generally automatic. Mm-hmm. So you're looking at things like payroll costs are going up, utilities costs are going up, you know, revenues from the state, their projection is a 2% increase. So about 90–95% of the budget really doesn't change. It's not something that you have a lot of latitude to make any type of decisions on.
And if we're like short-staffed in certain departments, obviously that they want to get back to full staff, you know, that type of
Yep,
thing.
that would be the kind of thing I talked about, you know, staffing wise. We'll be at least dealing with the required raises through like union contracts and things like that. But when it comes to staffing, like of Parks and Recreation Department, that's something I know is going to be a huge conversation, and working on bringing that back. Right. So that's something that, yeah, that budget I'm sure is going to spend quite a bit of time talking on. And then any other type of commercial things, improvements, stuff like that. That'll be the bulk of the conversation.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'd just make a recommendation. One perk that we have, at least the 2 years I've been on through this process, it's all on video, our meetings, and you can get a sense. I appreciate that it's going to look different, but you can get a sense for what we as a council looked at, and exactly that same thing. Like we got multiple, you know, budget version 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we would say this is what we want. You know, we wanted a budget that I wanted to see a budget with 0 mills, right? Because I wanted to see what that meant if we didn't implement PA 33. And, or we would say we want a budget that doesn't include pay raises or does include a fire truck or whatever. So it's a great source, if anyone has time or desire, to kind of skim through. You can kind of watch it fairly fast, but you'll get a good sense of, we really worked well together, I felt like, in going through it. And the first one we had Tim, and the second one we had John. So we had, you know, this is my 3rd time with 3 different budgets. So it's okay that it's going to be different because it hasn't been the same yet. But I feel like we really, for the first time this past 2 years, helped the residents see. And that's where we found a lot of questionable budgetary items that we said, no way, we're not going to just, I mean, and one of them, $700,000, and it was in the Department of Public Safety, and they're like, well, you know, oops, you know, and because what you then get is, oh, it's in the budget, so spend it, and we're like, wait. When you and I are writing that check every year for PA 33, you know, so that would be my only advice is, don't freak out, because we're fine. We've had 3 different budgets over the last 2 years.
When you did it last time, was it live through BSNA that you were able to like change numbers on the fly?
No, that has
John
never
did not
happened.
do BSNA. He was.
Sometimes we found out after the fact, like once they presented a budget, and we found out raises were built into the budget, we didn't even know that. So the
Because they hid them.
decisions weren't even made about doing that yet, but they were already put into the budget with.
But we won't have that problem with our
Right.
staff.
Right. I mean, in some of them, you know, 10, 15% that we didn't even know about.
Yeah.
Yeah, so to give you a little bit of comfort, when I was in Marine City, when I first came in, they were warned that they were getting close to being taken over by the state because their funding situation was so bad. They had $600,000 in the bank, which was about, I don't know, half of what they would spend in a year. So when I started my first year, I was able to actually save $200,000. By the time I left, there was $1.8 million in the bank from the $600,000. So I really bring the budget down to what's needed, and then start slowly building from there.
And I think it's probably a good time to get into some of the legal background too, especially because there's been some good points and questions. There's some confusion about what a budget is sometimes. A budget it's a couple different things. From a legal perspective, it's an authorization to spend. You might hear, I don't know if Elaine will use this term or this format, but the term appropriations ordinance. There's a process by which you adopt an ordinance, or when you adopt the budget, you are appropriating money. It doesn't mean you're directing that it be spent. You are saying that within this level of dollars, this department may function going forward for the fiscal year. And by the way, our fiscal year is July 1 to June 30th, if you didn't know. The state, by the way, is October 1 to September 30th, which makes absolutely no sense, and it's very confusing sometimes for funding purposes. But my point in bringing that up is a budget doesn't mean it's going to be spent. A budget means that this department or this line item can spend up to that much money, but there are still checks and balances involved. For example, if the council has a policy on we are not authorizing raises until it comes to us to authorize a raise, well, just because I'm authorized to spend $1 million on this department Doesn't mean I can just willy-nilly grant raises so I can spend the full $1 million if I'm the city manager, right? It doesn't work that way. It's an authorization to spend within the rules that the charter, the ordinances, and council itself has adopted. We have a purchasing practice ordinance in place, which limits and restricts how much the city manager can spend on any one purchase or any one item before it has to either go out for bids and then come to you. Those different limitations restrict the ability to spend so that a city manager can't say, great, I got $500,000 in the vehicle budget, I'm gonna go buy some fancy new Escalades. No, it doesn't work like that. So just don't stress too much about the roadmap, as sometimes I call it. It is just that. It's a working guide to give you a general idea of what might possibly be spent in the coming year under that particular line or departmental section. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you'll control a lot of that as the council because the management will bring it to you. A lot of that, as Elaine already pointed out, is out of your control because it's just fixed costs that exists already, and that'll be explained. And then you can always amend at any time. So you're not going to go home and lose sleep because, I forgot to bring that one up. I forgot to get that one changed. You won't lose sleep over that because at any time, the council can adopt and amend the budget. And we actually have a process in place where there's a mid-year and then there's a year-end reconciliation of the budget. So to Patrick's point or question earlier, I believe you'll probably use this format, I'm assuming. You'll see what the original budget was, and you'll see what it ended up being. Because you might see a $500,000 difference because we didn't fill 3 positions that year, or we didn't buy 3 things we thought we might buy. So that helps, gives you some context too, as you're trying to think through what should this look like for the next fiscal year and beyond. And hopefully that's a little bit of legal help. You know, there's some legal requirements too. The Uniform Budgeting Act controls what we do and how it looks, and this public hearing process that we have to go through for the public to be able to speak. But that's a little bit more background for anybody who might be wondering why we use the words we use or why these rigid rules about timing are in place. Hopefully that's helpful.
What is the appropriations? How much can she spend without?
I believe it's 7,500. Which, you know, with inflation, you're always allowed to raise that as the council if you'd like. So it's something we would have to do by ordinance.
Okay, item E, updates.
So economic development, I know at one point in time, I had talked to the mayor about there is an ordinance that we have for a downtown development authority, which I know has not been active for a while. And we've kind of been talking about some ideas for economic development for the community. And the state actually does have a lot of different things to help with economic development. There are programs that you can participate in, like redevelopment ready community, Main Street, things like that. There are tax increment options that you can do that are enabled through the state laws, such as local development authorities, brownfields, corridor improvements. There are a lot of different things that we can do. We don't really have anyone specifically focusing on economic development. If I do get calls from anyone, I'm certainly more than happy to meet with them, see what they have to say. I haven't really had a lot of that information. Probably the most predominant thing from an economic development perspective is the interest of some local businesses about whether we are going to do medical marijuana establishments in the community, which that not only is something that could potentially help a community, the business owners, but there are also ramifications from a funding level or funding from the state level. So as far as economic development, that's something that certainly merits, I think, a lot more conversation about what we want to do from a direction moving forward. We do have a master plan that was recently updated. There are, I think, a lot of good ideas and information in there, and that really is kind of a guide for future implementation. Other than that, I don't really have anything else to speak on at the moment. If anybody has any questions about it.
Well, it is an important part of what we do. I mean, I've been trying to do, we call it selling Fraser. I've talked to a company about the bank. They're looking to put a world headquarters, and they're looking for a building to do that. The state-of-the-art car washes, maybe on Garfield. And when Mr. Thompson was around, we visited a couple of sites to add on to their businesses and what we can do with them. So we do need that in this city. It just can't, I'm just kind of freelancing, and we don't have somebody to do that. And our planners help on a couple items, but as Elaine said, it's to grow the city with the little bit we have. We need some help doing that. I know we can capitalize the county. Our cackle says that we can utilize their people if we need to. And, maybe the DDA is something that we look back into trying to get going again in the future.
One of the things about like DDAs and tax increment authorities is that what they do is they take a look at the taxable value of properties, kind of freeze it at a point in time, and then capture the tax increments in future years to make some type of improvement in whatever district it may be.
I think we should work with the local chamber now that we're a member of the chamber. I think really should identify some sites in the city that are ripe for development, and maybe talk with zoning boards, things of that nature, of what type of businesses would fit the best in that type of area, and try to sell it out to the chambers, the local. There's businesses looking for sites, but they don't know about them. If we have some prepackaged, this is perfect for a drive-through strip mall, or this is perfect for an industrial area. If we have them not pre-planned, but pre-prepared to say, hey, you're looking for Fraser, you're looking to put a car wash in, right next to the bank, there's that empty lot, that might be a perfect spot, or something along those lines, and, there's a lot of different possibilities, and, but I think we gotta make the most of our,
Yeah, I've been just putting our master plan, because it states a lot of that in there, shows the business districts and the zonings and stuff like that, but it's you need somebody to be working on it, or we do, for sure. Okay, parks.
I know we have kind of two items here. The two, I think, I'm not sure how it got divided into parks and recreation.
Because it's two separate things, really.
Park
So-
improvement,
parks.
recreation.
So, I know we've had a little bit of confusion on this, and I was very confused when I first started here because it was not clear to me at all. So, we technically have a Parks and Recreation Department. So that would be administrative. Previously, we had a director for Parks and Recreation, and when COVID hit, pretty much the whole department was closed up, shut down, everybody was sent home, and we've been working on kind of reconstituting that. Sarah has been doing a wonderful job on leading that, and first and foremost, it was getting the doors open here at the Senior Activity Center, and then starting to build upon that. She's been doing a little bit of that. She's kind of built a website and started to push out information for recreation. Right now, that's about all we have because Sarah is really all we have, and Sarah is also our finance director and assistant city manager, and she's going to be taking over HR March 1st. So we really have a quarter of a person doing parks. We have Diane here at the center that does the van coordination, and she's been helping out with coordination of people here at the building. With COVID still being very prevalent and almost getting worse, it seems like day by day. Certainly not something that we are gonna jump in and have everything open tomorrow, but it is something that we need to be planned and prepared and ready for it in the future. Now, one potential issue that is a drawback, which talking about funding, it may not be so much, is that we don't have a current Parks and Recreation plan, which if you want to tap into funding at the state, you have to have a current plan. The body that should be doing that, this kind of goes into the next thing, we have a Recreation Commission. It's not a Parks and Recreation Commission, it's solely Recreation Commission. I wouldn't say it's unique to the city, but a lot of communities, you do say like a commission that is kind of an umbrella over both. We have a ordinance that created the Recreation Commission, and it's very specific, the role that Recreation Commission has, and they're only an advisory board to city council. So the really two roles for Recreation Commission is to kind of develop like the annual plan for recreation, to develop a budget, and to pass that on to city council for review and approval. I don't know what's been done in the past. I know the last year with like 3 city managers, it has not been easy. And I know currently we have a lack of people on the commission to really be able to get quorum. It's been very challenging. So this is something certainly Sarah and I have been working on. I know that several council members have been really involved with this and wanting to get things pushed forward. And you know, we're here to do what we can, but we have to look to council as a whole to help make decisions about what's going to be happening with both the Parks and Recreation Department and the Recreation Commission. I don't really know from this point where to go forward with it. We have obviously reached out for applications. I don't know if we have any applications for anyone willing to serve on the Recreation Commission at this point. We have one. Okay. And then Dana is currently on the board. We'll get to that part later.
I haven't had a chance to formally resign because there haven't been any meetings.
Well, and I don't necessarily
I can submit it in writing, but I wanted to go to the meeting and do that, but there haven't been any.
I don't necessarily know that you need to resign because you may not even be eligible to be on it as a council member.
I think when we talked before was that I only get one vote, right? So that if I vote for something as a commissioner and then it comes to council, that I wouldn't be able to vote again, like my commission vote would stand.
I think
No?
Don has looked into it a little bit
Okay.
more. I don't know if you want to touch on that.
That isn't where we're going to end up, but that might be a closed session legal opinion unless you want to talk about it now, I suppose, but.
Wait a minute, are you trying to rope me into getting to do both?
No.
No. It's nothing secret. It's just that we have looked at the question and we're prepared to talk about it tonight. In our opinion, the two offices are incompatible under the law, under the actual statute that's called the Incompatible Offices Act. It doesn't hit all 3 of the buttons that we look at, but it hits 2 of them, with supervision being one and duty to the both roles in the other, and potentially having a conflict of roles sometimes. Yeah. So yeah, the short version is we're very confident that it's incompatible for a council person to be on the rec commission. Yeah, don't worry, I don't want. Okay. I didn't know if I was letting you down.
Yeah, no fears there.
Okay.
I can still volunteer as a resident.
Of course,
and help,
of course.
So I'm good.
Yes.
Yeah.
So for Parks and Recreation Department and to a certain extent the Recreation Commission, we do have it on the agenda for discussion at the next meeting so that we can really start talking a little bit more about what we see moving forward. One of my biggest things is that we need to work on a master plan, so a Parks and Recreation plan. So you may think that you know what people want to do, or we've always done this in the past, we've always had leagues for this, that, and the other. Times are changing. When I was in Marine City, we saw a degradation of participation in all of these like group type sports that typically, like when I was growing up, everybody was in it. Things are changing because technology, certainly COVID's had an impact on it. The kids today, they're very different in how they learn, how they interact with people. And one of, I think, the most important things, especially when you're doing your Parks and Rec plan, is getting that survey and getting it right, getting it to the right people. So a lot of times you see surveys go out and it goes to the parents, they're doing it because they think this is what their kids want, and then when you go to schedule events, mom said I was going to do this, I don't want to do that. So it's about really putting together the best front end for a survey to be able to do that. And then one of the things with a Parks and Recreation plan is that there are so many stipulations and guidelines and rules and things that you have to do for this plan to be able to get the funding from the state. It's not something that you would just have a appointed board in charge of. It really needs to be something that, like the clerk's department, the city manager, the planner are working in coordination with a group of people, whether that be Recreation Commission, City Council, or some type of formed temporary committee or something. It really needs to be done right so that you can check off all those boxes, and I mean literally check off all those boxes, because for your Parks and Rec plan, your application to the state, there are boxes that you have to check off, that you did your public involvement, you did your surveys, you did your public notices, you had your public hearings. There's a lot that goes into this public plan, and I want to make that our next step, and I want to get it started as soon as possible. So we can talk about that at the next meeting, because we're not taking any action or anything tonight, but that was something that I really wanted to get out there, that we need to start doing that.
So, can I,
Go ahead, no.
thank you.
For you.
So two things. One, just to back up a touch. So then can I just send an email and formally resign from the Parks and Recreation Commission so we can just get this?
Sure.
And we can stop talking about it?
I didn't know you were still on it. I'm like, I'm totally lost over
Yeah,
here.
well, I guess it's always been like precedent that like you go and you resign in the meeting and thank everyone for your time on the commission, and you kind of like, say goodbye. So I was kind of waiting to like do it like that.
For the moment.
Yeah, for the moment, to be nice and do that, but it's been months now, so I think it's time to just do it. And I can still show up as a resident and do that. Okay, so I will do that. And then the other thing, as far as, it basically what it sounds like to me from what you're saying and the need, my opinion really hasn't changed much from our last meeting, that I don't necessarily think that we need a director. I've never really understood why it has to be a director level position. I mean, to me, that's a lot of money. It comes with that eminence that we were talking about before, right? I mean, I think that it could be, if Sarah is taking over HR, we could provide a salary range that allows for some flexibility, where she could find someone that could come in. Who knows? It could be someone that has a kinesiology degree right out of college, and they want to come in and they planned all of their sorority functions. I mean, it could be somebody that we could work with and that we could develop that's not going to cost the city $80,000 a year to be a director. I think that there's more than one way to skin a cat, as long as that leadership is there and that capacity for this person to come in and develop the plan, because then there's that flexibility as well with, oh, it's not as COVID-y right now, or ooh, super COVID-y, we got to back it up. So I still think that we need to hire someone full-time in that role to come up with a plan rather than provide this person with a plan.
So Sarah has actually been doing a little bit of investigation, some of the different type of like titles and roles other communities have, pay scales, things like that. Hopefully we should have something ready for discussion at the next meeting regarding that.
I mean, we have, employee engagement people that work for my company that make 50, you know what I mean? And that's something that's reasonable, and that's kind of what they do. They plan all of our great place to work events and things like that, and I mean, you could build on something like that, in my opinion. So I don't know, I'm not sold on that it has to be a director, but if we want to do anything, you guys don't have the time. We need to get somebody in here. That's my opinion.
And I got a general question. So from the sounds of it, it's like, okay, where's the Parks and Rec Commission fall in? Where's the city fall in? It's kind of what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Who's going to make the plan? Is it the commission? Is it administration? Who's going to have time to do that plan? So I echo with Dale, we need somebody that actually can come up with a plan so we can get the funding, check all those boxes, make sure it's being done right. Because heaven knows you guys, you're juggling many different things. And I agree, it doesn't necessarily have to be a director. That's what I would envision, but I could scale that back. But I'm afraid we're going to keep punting it, and pretty soon, you're going to have something totally non-existent. All the kids are going out other places. My kids go to Roseville right now. They're playing basketball, wrestling. Some of these activities are all over the place. But I agree, it has to be reimagined. I see kids shoot. My kids play like Minecraft and these types of things. Why not have a community thing where, hey, they all get together and they're on their tablets here, and that way they get to socialize and do that. That's something that wouldn't cost the city hardly anything, except for basic supervision or somebody running it, which pay a teenager $15 an hour to run a group. So I think it can be reimagined with traditional sports, because I think it is important for our kids. I mean, we're the only city around that doesn't have it, but we got to get that plan going. And I'm afraid with the Rec Commission, it's too much of an obligation for them to come up with a plan, because
We You can't even
They're
get a
not-
quorum.
You can't even get a
meeting at this
quorum,
point.
and so it's not gonna get the attention it really deserves. Plan's gotta come up somehow, whether, you know, whether it's you guys, employee we hire to get senior center going up, and working towards the summer to have some sort of recreation plan for our kids. We gotta develop some. I think we still have to have a full-time person to get that plan up and going and making sure it's being implemented. But as far as what that plan looks like, I think it's totally flexible, and, you know, we gotta find out what the population wants, but that's a hard thing to get as well, because who looks at their email, you know, they're just junking surveys, you know, so how do you get that information that's truly reflective of what the population wants?
Well, I was gonna bring it up to, at the meeting, because I've been doing a little bit of work on it, is I talked to Bob Cannon in Clinton Township, and the other cities are willing to share their plan with us. So if you can almost copy and paste some of their plans and their ideas, you know, just dumb it down a little because we're not as big as they are.
Right.
Then you're working with the communities around you, knowing what they have and what you can possibly share or not share. So, and you know, I was gonna talk about that at the next meeting to give
I think
more
it's
contact
gonna-
information, but that's what I think the position needs to be at this
Yeah, it's
point.
gonna-
Obviously, we can't do anything right here at this meeting, but, that should be considered.
Well, and honestly, all of the conversations that I've had with Sarah, I mean, you've done a fantastic job, I think, and you really have your kind of finger on the pulse of what people like. I mean, things have been going really well, and you have some solid ideas, so, I think that hiring someone and you know, leading them, I think that would,
It's actually a fun job, I think.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
First order of business, find out where you're gonna hold all this stuff that's not.
I mean, chair yoga sold out, right?
We are seeing more traffic, especially on the rec Facebook page. We had almost 70,000 people just for a couple posts within December. The biggest problem is finding a space to have anything that is not senior related. The schools aren't allowing us access. It can't be held in this building. It really can't be held in City Hall. So weather dependent, it becomes where can we hold it outside? Will people really attend a tennis clinic or anything that we would have a facility for? It's yet to be seen. I think I've got about 1,000 people that have gone on the virtual site that I set up. It's not much, but it provides an outlet. There's a lot of resources and links in there that people aren't aware of, and it's all free to the community. While they can do OutSchool, which is a Zoom-based platform, that's all going to be at cost. So I didn't want to do anything where we aren't providing the programming free to our residents. In the future, that might be available if we get more traffic on there to have people that would teach classes, but that'd be something that we'd have to gauge whether or not it's going to be cost effective. And we are working on another chair yoga class, so it was sold out, but we have enough, I think, for another group.
Don, can I ask you a question? So obviously we have a facility problem in the city to hold indoor type of sports. Can the city rent out a space, say, for a local church that has a gym or something? Is that allowed under city religion? Is that something that?
Separation of church and state?
Yeah, kind of in a sense, but
Like
I
the
mean,
Lions
is
Club or
it?
something like that, like.
Say that again?
Like the Lions Club building, like any type of facility like that?
Right, well, I'm just saying, because some local churches have big gymnasiums that could be used, like I say, we read it on a Tuesday and Thursday for basketball, for example. Just say it, is that allowed, you know, with the city to rent out a property if it's a religious facility? Is that, I'm just looking at other options.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. The Lions Club was one that I was thinking of before you asked the religious part of the question, but, because there are facilities like that. I'd have to look at it. Well, I'd have
I'm
to
sorry, Don, I've heard of other cities doing it is, as long as it's a contract and it's
Yes.
not a donation to a church.
Correct.
But it's a service.
If you think about the separation of church and state, we can't, as a government, sponsor a particular religion. We can't support or endorse one. But if it's a partnership with a local establishment of any kind, as a municipality, we're not making a charitable donation. We can't do that. We are not, supporting or donating to a nonprofit or subsidizing a nonprofit. We're strictly just partnering with them at market rates for, using of their facilities, which churches don't charge a lot in my experience. So whatever their rates are, we're entitled to participate like any other municipal, like any other corporation might do.
So I think that might be a short-term solution to holding these problems if we talk to some local churches.
St. Malachi's, it's huge.
Yeah, and
Where-
it's revenue
St.
for
John
the.
Lutheran, too.
Where it gets a little bit sticky, and we have to be very careful.
Right.
Is favoritism. So if we had all different denominations of churches, and I don't know that we have that many around that that would be interested in doing this for us. But if we had too many different denominations and we started to favor one over another, now it starts to get a little bit dicey. Especially if they're not all Christian, if there's other types of
Right, we
religions
can't mix
involved.
the religion with
know,
the sporting event, I
yeah.
understand that, but,
And then
but
you
as
get
long as, hey, we just wanna rent out your gym,
Right.
we pay so much per year to run out the gym on certain days, I think that might be a solution to our problem short term. So.
Could be.
And there are a couple other potential options, so tax foreclosure properties, that's something that we've been looking at. Hasn't been anything that's worked for us to this point, unfortunately. And then the other option is the grant funding that was used for this building that is really what is making it so we can only use this for seniors. If we were to pay that off, then we would get out from that burden and we'd be able to open up this building to use for everyone.
Yeah, I'd like to turn this into.
That
a
number is
senior-
about 1.5 million.
No, into an activity center, but they screwed that up when
Community
they,
center.
yeah, community center, they screwed that up. when
Went
they
up to
started
1.5.
it. We won't talk about that. But can we talk about this at our next meeting?
Yep, I think we're about done probably with the conversation. But yeah, we'll have it on the next agenda for a little bit more discussion and probably have some more information and updates to provide you then.
Okay, boards and commissions.
All right. I learned today, and I don't know if I knew this before, as I was thinking about different ways of talking about this topic. If you go on to our website, we actually have a boards and commissions handbook. That thing is old.
It's super old.
So I didn't take a lot of time going through it, all of its antiquities, but it might be worth a project update, whether that's a committee of maybe people who serve right now on boards and commissions or have served, just put a group together to kind of go through it and revamp it, bring it into the 2020s, or even the 2010s, because I think it was 2001, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, I didn't bring a copy of that with me, but that is out there, so assuming that's been adopted by the council in 2001, it does govern our boards and commissions, and we might want to take a look and see if anything in there contradicts anything else I might say tonight, but not going to say too much on the topic. Just kind of give you some basic idea of what it means to be a board or commission. Some of them, they're going to differ in their powers and in their formation and their nature. We call a lot of them quasi-judicial. That's a fancy term for saying that they actually have authority and powers that are independent of council. The good examples of those are the Zoning Board of Appeals. That's a statutory board. The Planning Commission, also a statutory body. They are given power by state law that we then give them through our ordinances as well to make decisions on matters of public policy that aren't subject to council review. They're a little bit like a court with no appellate option other than to go to court if you choose to appeal the outcome at those hearings. So we do have boards and commissions that have power like that is outside the purview of council or any legislative body. They're in another dimension. You think about the three branches of government, they're sort of in their fourth branch, right? They're sort of in their own place. A little bit administrative, a little bit legislative, and a little bit judicial. Also on that list of boards that have powers beyond city council, we have the Act 78 Civil Service Commission, we have the Assessing Board of Review, the Construction Board of Appeals, the Election Commission, and the Local Officers Compensation Commission. I don't know if I've missed any others that have actual power, but those are the ones that I was able to come up with that we have in the city that at least at some point are active and have an obligation to do something. We have a number of boards, at least three that I was able to find that are advisory in nature. That's the Recreation Commission, which, by the way, was formed in 1968. That ordinance could probably stand to be polished up a bit. We have the Historical Commission, which I still can't figure out how, because I can find no ordinance, I can find no document or authorizing power to create this thing, but it's a very active thing in our city, and it seems like a good thing, but I just don't know what controls it. I don't even know if they have bylaws or.
They do.
They do. I actually sent Eileen some basic information, but I think I have a book at home that I can I'm gonna bring it to her, and I think it's got some information in it.
So I guess from the lawyer in me, what I'm kind of hinting at is this a city commission? Or is this a group of citizens who got together and created something that the city supports by letting them use website space? I don't know.
Well, you have to look at the history of the Baumgartner house that was donated to the city.
Right.
So it's a city museum, the Hemi Barn, actually the firefighters sponsored that to bring that Hemi Barn from the railroad tracks to bring it over to that facility. So it's been ongoing for a long time.
I know.
Do they take an oath of office as commissioners or get
Remember that?
paid?
The commissioners do not get paid.
Okay.
No, they wouldn't be
They're
paid.
non-paid board.
They wouldn't be paid, but as far as an oath of office, it's a great question. Have we sworn, has Cindy sworn anybody in lately? I don't know. So-
We appointed
starting,
them.
we're starting our initial search on
We
the
appoint them.
formation.
We
of
do.
Yeah, we appointed them for sure.
We appointed them,
Okay.
but they don't get sworn.
Yeah,
Maybe
we're-
that.
we're
I know, 'cause I
Not
used to be
nothing.
I used to be on the hysterical commission.
Ah,
We're,
There's a
we're
reason
looking back at how far back the meeting minutes go to find kind of the beginning point, and then from there, we'll be looking at city council meeting minutes to see if there was some type of resolution or something that allowed for the formation of that group. And then building upon that, and I think talking about the Recreation Commission ordinance, that might be something that we might want to solidify the Historic Commission by having an ordinance for that as well that really outlines and details what their responsibilities are.
Well, the
Oh,
Historical
don't try to change
Commission-
it up on these people now. You will have a coup. Trust me, I know.
It makes things easier for everyone.
They didn't say change it, they said memorialize it.
There you
There's
go.
a difference.
They used to publish a paper.
They don't have any authority right now.
An update
They never
every
had
month.
that authority. So.
So you may be able to get your minutes off.
Oh, their
They used
newsletter?
to publish their newsletter. It's called Strawberry Preserves.
Not their newsletters, our newsletters. They're trying to figure out.
Well, they
how
had their
have
own.
power.
They had their own.
Wait, they don't care about what they're doing. They want to know why.
We
Why they
understand that.
exist.
What I am telling you is this group of volunteers, and that's all they are, and they have the historical society that you have to pay them. And it fell somewhere off of the society that because the society was trying to preserve the house, and the city basically allowed them to, because these individuals raised the money, like right now they're trying to raise money to fix the roof, to get a new roof. If they didn't do that, it would be on the city to do that because the city owns the property. So they work within the budget, which is very slim, that they get every year. Yeah, and I would just say that's not an apple cart I want to upset because they're volunteers. They don't make any decisions other than when they're going to have sales or not sales and what they're going to do, what repairs they're going to do to the house with the money that they earn.
So there's a historical society and a historical commission,
There
correct?
are,
Correct.
There are two.
Yeah.
and we're just, I mean, the lawyer in me would ask this question, where does the money go? Who keeps the money?
Yep.
The city does. The society is all by itself because it's
Right.
got a 501(c)(3),
Yes,
so
yes.
that's none of the city's business.
Right.
But all the money that they earn comes to the city. That's why they were having like a meltdown when it was moved out of their GL because they didn't know it was earmarked. So now it's supposed to be earmarked specifically for the roof.
Okay.
And that's why I brought up the point about they always had a cash kitty of $50 from their sales. They'd keep it there so they could go buy toilet paper or whatever instead of, okay, I need to get permission to go buy a thing. I mean, that's ridiculous. I'm sorry. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. These people are working voluntarily. They have never taken that money and done anything fun for themselves. I've known these people for years. And that money comes to the city. And you guys get it. And it's being deposited in the city funds for repairs to that house, which are ultimately the city's responsibility, not theirs. But it's a volunteer group, and that's their passion, is to keep this house preserved. So I would say tread carefully.
If they're receiving money as a 501c3, should the city be maintaining it?
No, and that's
No.
more.
That's what I'm thinking.
That's what I'm
from-
trying to figure
All
out.
kinds of, like
the
my
count-
lawyer, oh
Yes,
my God.
I'm on the Macomb Food Program Board, and we've actually separated from Macomb Community Action because of the conflict of being a 501c3 and the county maintaining our funds internally.
Well,
So that was where if
No,
they're
no. They're two
receiving.
separate funds. The society maintains their funds all by themselves.
Okay,
The Historical Commission, they just raise the money and they deposit it here at the city.
Yeah, this is like the fund balance thing that we were talking
Mm-hmm.
about that and like drug forfeiture and some other things John had zeroed out. And we have to just get that money back into.
back where, into that GL, because it should have been earmarked for the roof. The roof's going to need to be replaced. And again, ultimately, it's the city's responsibility, but they're just raising the money instead of it coming out of the general fund.
Is the commission itself the 501c3 or is
No.
the society?
No.
Okay.
No,
So I
they're
keep,
The commission doesn't exist, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
No, it does.
No, I mean, it's not a statute, it's not registered with the
There's a
state as
volunteer
thing.
group that calls themselves the commission.
Exactly.
What I'm saying is the
That we
state doesn't
appointed them
recognize it
to.
as a corporate entity. It's not a registered corporate entity with the
No.
state of Michigan.
No.
That's what I'm trying to say. It's not a 401c3 or any kind of corporate entity. It's literally just a city commission.
We have a budget for the Historic Commission. We have a board of people that we appoint that make decisions there, and they make decisions based upon that budget. But then there's also this Historical Society that is a side group, which is very common for a lot of communities
Exactly.
to have both, because you have that kind of like divided.
Like, we have the
interest.
Parks and Rec, and then we have Fraser First. Same exact scenario, just different. One's a 503, one's not, you know, and so that's how that came to be, but
We have a lot of research and a lot still to figure out on our end, moving forward with things like the budget.
yeah. And their budget is to maintain the house and the grounds.
We just want to make sure the rules are clear.
Yeah, it wouldn't
That's all.
be, to your point, I don't think it'd be upsetting the apple cart to write an ordinance that creates them formally and says the money that they raise is for what they say it's
Oh, no,
for.
that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
If you're gonna sit there and say, well, this is what you can and
Oh,
cannot
no,
do,
no, right.
you're going to have,
Well, you
We-
have to.
We
say
can't even find
part.
copies of.
No, no, no.
The
I mean,
Historic
you're not
Commission's
understanding.
rules.
We do have to tell them. I no disrespect to any of the volunteers, but if there's not rules in place, we as a city are opening ourselves to liability for whatever they do.
I'm not talking about that, though.
No, but that's what he's talking about. We have to have a rule and a structure. And just as all the other ordinances that control all of the other boards and commissions, if there isn't one, it's not because they're doing something wrong. It's to protect the city because we haven't been doing things the right way. It's that simple.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong,
That's
but like
exactly
you
what-
said earlier, it could just be memorialized around what they're currently doing.
Of course,
So then
yeah.
that would-
And that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Well, that's exactly.
Definitely tread carefully, yes.
We have that with the paid on call. There's a budget, there's a budget for paid on call firefighters. Yet the firefighters have their own charitable number
Okay.
to do fundraising. That fundraising goes to charity. But yet the city's budget just goes to pay and that for the firefighters. So it's a similar thing, but it's two different bank accounts.
Two different entities, not combined whatsoever.
You'll fix it.
So
We will,
figure it out.
we will move it forward, yes. On that list of advisory, I also found that we have a Citizens Advisory Committee, created in
On
1975.
the books, but I don't think that we have it active.
When I say we have it, right, it was created in 1975. The CAC doesn't seem to be
Called
active
Facebook now.
or exist, right? Yeah, that's true.
This is where I wish it was televised, darn it. That
Citizens
was a
will
good.
give you
Because that
advice.
information's so accurate.
Right? And then the charter mentions a bunch of other boards and commissions that I don't know have ever existed. Maybe one of them has. There's a Health and Welfare Commission that is authorized. Doesn't mean it was ever created. This is just the charter saying you can create these if you'd like. A Hospital Commission, a Public Housing Commission,
Oh, geez.
and a Civil Defense Commission. It's all in the
I want on
charter.
that one.
Yeah, you want to do that one?
Yeah.
The one that may have existed at one point and we've lost track of is a potential cemetery board. I thought that was interesting because we've talked in the past couple of years about owning cemeteries. We have the one combined with the library that we have. It's under our supervision
The
and
one that we're going to inherit.
control. No, we already own that one. And then we had,
No,
No, she's talking about the other.
and the other one.
oh, the one that we may end up inheriting that the
That's
lawyer asked us if we were willing to take it over, and then that COVID hit, and we kind of lost track of that, and they haven't really reached out again. I think she went off to have a family and maybe just got out of the practice of law for a while, so I even followed up with her
Is
once.
that the cemetery that was for sale?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Eventually, all cemeteries land on the community.
they are gonna land, right? Eventually, you run out of volunteers who are willing to run them.
Stuck with it in the first,
Yeah.
in the next place.
And if you think about, so cemetery law, I've learned so much about it, not because of city work, but because of a cemetery that actually uses me to help them with their work. Cemetery law is fascinatingly antique and antiquated and miserable to try to interpret because it's so old and nobody bothers to update it. But the basics.
died.
They all died, right? It was like Robert. Where's Robert? Who's the guy that wrote this?
Yeah, I want to slap Robert right now. He needs to
Right?
update his crap.
So the basics, the way I can distill cemetery law is that they're pretty much going to be run by volunteers who are going to decide how to sell the plots and the amenities to people, and they're going to put that money in a fund, and they're going to use that money to maintain the grounds. And then when you have nothing left to sell anymore, you have no more revenue coming in. You're going to run out of revenue
you
to
become
maintain
a
the grounds.
succubus of-
And then people are going to drop off the board because they're not interested anymore because they bought plots for themselves cheaper because they were on the board. And so now they're in the plots, and so eventually there's no more space to sell. And then what? So then the
And then you just gotta
municipality,
keep it pretty.
then the municipality takes over it.
Just float me down the Ganges. Don't stick me in a hole.
So bottom line to Elaine's point is every community is going to inherit or has inherited cemeteries because they're just ancient. The one that I represent, surprisingly enough, still has a very active, great board. They're still selling land, even though they were founded in the 1800s. I learned a lot because they had to get me involved because they buried somebody in the wrong spot.
I hear people.
Oh, I hate when that happens.
Nice. Yeah, so, and not to bore you guys with that story, but when you bury somebody in the wrong spot, it creates a fascinating legal problem because the people who own that spot want it back. The people who have put somebody in that spot don't want to move that somebody out of that spot. It gets very complicated as to who wins. And they're currently in litigation right now. I don't represent them on the litigation. They have an insurance defense counsel doing that. Just fascinating stuff, though. I had to go out and look at the maps and learn how they do all the work they do and figure out where people go. And bottom line, though, is that's a function that becomes a city function at some point, and that can be challenging for a municipality to do. But there are actually conferences every year for municipal cemetery people to go to talk about their common experiences with managing cemeteries on behalf of the municipality. So keep that in mind. But that's really all I had on boards and commissions and just kind of letting you know what's out there and what I think is out there and what we could put out there. And certainly you guys can create other ones over the course of time if you see a need. No more. Hey, you just talked about the DDA.
I have a boards and commissions question. So I've always just kind of wondered, like, why, if we have all these different commissions and boards, like, why they don't come and present. I know that that was discussed when I was in Parks and Recreation, to have them come and talk to council, send a representative every month. Like, it seems to me like there should be that dialogue between us and them every time, at every meeting. Like, they should give an update. It should be an agenda item, even if it's short, or they can let us know in advance, we don't have anything to talk about. But it just kind of seems like the right hand doesn't know what the left one's doing if we're not.
Well, that was happening when I was on Parks and Rec, because I would come to the meetings and tell them, give them an update.
I mean, we can't get a quorum now, we can't. So.
Well, yeah, but I'm
But
just
I'm just
saying,
saying, in a
it's
perfect
about
world-
people and their time and people who want to take the time to do that. So.
But as you
It
know,
wasn't an
I've
agenda.
offered, and I've offered every group to just, any time to come forward because, the agendas are long. We don't want to add things that aren't needed, so if they need to come, that they do, but, the
It would be
offer's
nice if
there.
we could just get like an update. You get the meeting minutes for all the boards.
Yeah.
I know that there's a time delay,
I don't
especially
really-
some of them, that you've got one on your next agenda that's like a year behind.
Well, and I don't know that you really, I mean, unless you, right, you don't capture, the essence of the meeting. Like, you could read the minutes and who knows if something were, God forbid, missed or, I don't know.
It's very common to have representatives on each board. A lot of times you'll see that in communities where, like, one person is on, like, each of your
Like David's the
lower
liaison.
boards, right? Like, you have one person from council that's on planning commission, you have one person on CDA, one person on recreation, something like that. I think the only overlap that we have right now is planning. That we just have
Recreation.
that we just have a representative that attends.
We don't have any council people doing any.
No,
boards and
just
commissions.
recreation.
He is the ex officio for rec, right?
Yep.
Yes.
That's the only one I can think of.
Liaison.
And that's only because someone told us we were supposed to. We said,
Right,
"Oh, we'll
because the
do it."
ordinance says so, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, planning and zoning are independent of you guys, so that they wouldn't have a council rep. They can have one person on both boards by law. So one person can be the liaison, and I think Frank Farina is our liaison for both right now. But no, there is always a disconnect in communities between boards and commissions and the city council that created them. Part of that, I think, goes to the ordinance that you write when you create them. Do you impose obligations of reporting? Do you impose obligations of minutes or an annual meeting or other types of updates? What you put in the ordinance kind of governs how they move forward typically. So.
Yeah, even a quarterly
updates
update.
is Great, at least quarterly updates.
Or, what about,
Exactly.
not to
That's why I
add,
went to the meeting, the ZBA, because I was so tired of not knowing what's going in front of Hockey Land. And then knowing the cluster with Starbucks and the parking, and I was like, who's responsible? And I went to the meeting, they're like, why are you here? And it was that eminence, they were freaking out.
yes, the
It was, so it is true, they were freaking out.
That's a board, that's not employees. That's it.
Oh,
citizens.
I can tell you as an
She brought her
employee's wife,
eminence with
they
her.
were freaking out, they freak out every time. They know, the minute someone walks in, all of city
See,
council
I only have that
knows.
effect on the school board. They
They
always
know.
are like, oh crap, what is she
But,
doing?
yeah, I was like, I'm just here to find out what you're gonna vote on, because we have no way of knowing, and then people are asking us, and you're like, well, I'm on council, but I have no idea. I don't know where the Starbucks is going.
one thing we could do, I mean, it really is a lot to ask for
in
them
the
to
minor
keep you
parking lot.
updated on the minutia of people who want a 6-foot variance for a fence,
Right.
it's a lot to ask. But what they could possibly do maybe was when the agendas are ready, do they circulate their agendas to all of
No.
you? Then you can at least see the topics.
Well, I know the Parks one's published.
Yeah, but send it to us.
Yeah, just
through,
circulate
like,
when it's ready.
Could we make a rule that they have to send it to someone who then sends it to us?
Well,
Yeah,
and
the
we're
clerk,
working on corralling all of those agendas and running all of the
Okay.
agendas through the clerk's department.
Would this be a good time to add that stipulation in there then, to send it to us as well? Or?
So,
Well, we have to
post
do that at a
everything-
meeting. We can't do that right now.
We post everything online. I think,
We
I
need it
think
spoon-fed,
we'll
come on.
talk about it and see if we can maybe come up with some
Okay.
good
can't
alternatives.
We can make a rule, once you have it corralled, because we can just make a rule that, that's easy, but I need it spoon-fed. I'm not looking online, I'm not gonna lie. If
You don't
it's in an
even-
email, I'll look at it.
It's not even instinctual to look at a certain time. You don't know when to look.
Correct.
Right?
If I'm not on that board, I
will.
don't know.
Right?
I'll talk to Cindy and
Yeah,
we'll see
we're
what
gonna.
kind of options we can come up
Yeah, no, that makes total sense that it should all be streamlined if it's all city commissions and boards.
And I'll tell you, for you guys too, because it affects
Yep.
certainly us, a lot of times those meetings don't happen. Planning commission and zoning board didn't happen this month because they had nothing to talk about, or last night, or whatever night it was, they had no quorum for planning commission. So just to get something to you that says, January planning commission meeting, no agenda items, or,
Right.
Zoning board meeting, no agenda items, just so you're not wondering in the back of your minds, what are they working on? What's coming before them that could affect the city?
It makes us better, because then as you're talking economic development, or you're talking anything, yeah. I like it.
Are you gonna call a question?
No, I'm like, let's go.
Apparently, we're done with historical, so she's ready to go.
No, I'm just like, let's go. Because we can't make decisions, so let's just go.
That's all I have on boards and commissions, just sort of a background, sort of a talk through.
I've had a very long week.
And I think that moves us to public participation, right, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, let's make sure there's no other questions. Go ahead. Can you come up to the microphone?
You gotta be the only
We're
person.
trying to practice and make sure it all works. Nope.
No.
Just name and address. Name and address, please.
Shelley, you still gotta do your name and address.
Name and address.
Shelley Gilray, 16280 Pine Ridge Drive. And when I worked development for Kmart Corporation, we were selling some property, and I believe it was Euclid, Ohio. And part of the property we needed for Kmart was a cemetery. So we contacted the city, purchased the cemetery, purchased some land way out of town, because I believe at that time it was an older cemetery where there were no active, and buried them all over there. We felt
Are they sure they moved them? Because if not, you're gonna have a poltergeist situation.
Well, Kmart's now closed, so
blue light
now we know why.
Now it's double haunted.
They made a movie on that, I think, Poltergeist.
Poltergeist, that's what I'm saying. Did they actually move the bodies, or did they just build over them?
Oh my gosh.
Don't go to Euclid, Ohio.
Things floating in the aisles. We don't know why.
We're just gonna, we'll consolidate them all, and then we can turn that into a park.
So I see no other citizen participation, so we have to enter a closed session, so I have to ask you.
We're going to another location.
I was
Are
like,
we?
how are we doing a closed door when, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
we're-
so I
we're
make a
going over
motion to
room
move
across
into,
the hall, is that correct, Cindy?
I make a motion to move into closed session to consult with the city attorney regarding trial or settlement strategy in connection with Macomb County Circuit Court case number 2020-003248CD.
Okay, we have a motion, do we have a second? Second. We have a second, any questions on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries, we'll go into closed session at 8:30 PM.
Mr. Mayor, just a question of order. is it, because we're moving to another room, should we combine all of the closed sessions into one motion tonight?
Oh, if we can, I would love to.
It's a little bit unusual to do
Last
it
time I
that
wanted
way
to
for
do
the
that, you wouldn't
minutes.
let me.
Yeah.
But it's,
You're the one that usually makes us come back and.
I don't like combining them, but tonight is just updates and.
I'm gonna
you know,
amend my motion to go into closed session for A, B, and C as articulated on the agenda. Do I need to read them out loud? Because I will.
Do not. That's
We have
what
a
Cindy will use.
Second.
We have a motion, amended motion and amended second. Any questions on that motion? All in favor?
We need a roll
Aye.
call, Mr. Mayor. We need
Aye.
a roll call into the open meetings.
Okay.
Act.
It's so funny, I was like, I should call a roll call, just because now I know I can.
Yeah, I knew he needed one. I was waiting for him to say it. I have learned.
Councilmember Branson?
Yes.
Councilmember Blanky?
Yes?
Mayor Gurke?
Yes.
Councilmember Odell?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Shornack?
Yes.
Councilmember Sutherland?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Go to closed session at 8:31 PM.
So the heating situation's the same here?
Yep.
Oh, no.
Totally thinking that.
The
10 o'clock, I need a motion, please.
Motion to adjourn.
A motion, all in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Good night.
Cindy's like,
Cindy's like, what? Yes, we are.
Out. She's like, good night.
Thank you.
Thank
I feel sorry for this
Like, you
poor
can
young
write
lady. She's
anybody's
probably
name
like,
down.
This is boring as
I
shit.
heard Jeff.
Make it up.
But then in fairness, you did become an attorney, and let me just tell you. Yeah.
10 o'clock is early.
Oh, and that's our meeting. Yeah.
I'm convinced the CLO for my company does not sleep.
Okay, hurry up, Don. Don, get your,
There's still subs and chips for anybody. who wants it.
yeah, no, that's not what I want.
Oh, we still have it in the picture. You're up.
I need, I just want to see updated pictures of him.
You've got a weekend, right?
Is he rolling over?
James.
All day. Lucky dog.
Is he rolling over now?
Yes, very
I
much.
figured.
What I don't think he's figured out how to roll back, though.
Well,
Oh, so it gets stuck.
He rolls over on his tummy and he loves it. Loves